I downloaded Tinder on a Thursday night after an especially bad day at work. My boss had ripped apart a report I'd spent weeks on, and my only solace was the bottle of wine waiting for me at home. My best friend Kayla had been nagging me about getting back into dating for months. "You're too young to be this bitter," she'd said. "At least try." She was right, of course. It had been over a year since my last relationship, a messy breakup that left me questioning whether I was cut out for love at all. But the idea of meeting someone new, someone who could hurt me, felt like too much. Still, the alternative wasn't much better. So after pouring myself a glass of wine, I downloaded the app. At first, it was exactly as awful as I remembered. Guys posing with fish, flexing in gym mirrors, or listing requirements for their ideal woman. I swiped left on every single one, my mood souring with each profile. And then I saw him. Daniel. His profile was different. His photos weren't flashy. Just him in a white t-shirt and jeans, standing against a wooden fence. He wasn't trying too hard to impress anyone. His bio was short, but sincere. Looking for something real. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the screen. He seemed too good, too normal. But then I thought, what's the worst that could happen? I swiped right. The notification popped up instantly. "It's a match." Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent him a message. "Hey, nice profile. Are you really looking for something real, or is that just Tinder talk?" His reply came within seconds. "I could ask you the same thing. But yeah, I am. And you seem like the kind of person who doesn't settle for fake." His words made me smile. We ended up chatting for hours that night, trading stories and banter like old friends. He was funny, thoughtful, and just the right amount of self-deprecating. He told me about his love for hiking, his dream to visit Patagonia, and his favorite recipe for homemade pasta. By the time I went to bed, I felt lighter, hopeful even. Daniel texted me the next morning. "Last night was amazing. When can I take you out for real?" I stared at my phone, grinning like an idiot. His timing was impeccable, striking the perfect balance between interested and not overly eager. We decided on a coffee shop downtown, a safe, public place. I liked the familiarity of it, the mismatched chairs, the smell of roasted beans, and the hum of quiet conversation. It felt like neutral ground, where I could size him up in person without feeling trapped. The day of the date, I couldn't stop second-guessing myself. I tried on 3 different outfits before settling on a sweater and jeans, casual but presentable. When I arrived, my palms were damp, and my stomach churned with nervous energy. Daniel was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked exactly like his photos, only better. His hair was neatly tousled, and he was dressed simply but stylishly, in a navy button-up and dark jeans. He saw me before I saw him, and when our eyes met, he smiled. An easy, confident smile that put me at ease. "Jess," he said, standing to pull out my chair. "You're even prettier than I imagined." The compliment caught me off guard, but I managed a nervous laugh. "Thanks. You're not so bad yourself." We settled into conversation quickly. Daniel had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. His blue eyes locked on mine as we talked about everything from favorite childhood books to dream travel destinations. He listened intently, nodding along and asking thoughtful questions. At one point, I mentioned my love for hiking, and his face lit up. "You'd love this trail near my cabin," he said. "It's quiet, not too steep. The view at the top is incredible. You should come see it sometime." I hesitated, caught off guard by the invitation. It felt a little soon, but his tone was casual, like he was testing the waters. "Maybe," I said, smiling. "We'll see." When we finished our coffee, Daniel insisted on walking me to my car. The streets were quiet, the air crisp with the promise of winter. "I had a great time tonight," he said, his hands in his pockets. "I'd really like to see you again." "Me too," I admitted, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was 2 weeks later when I agreed to visit Daniel's cabin. By then, we'd seen each other 3 more times, each date more effortless than the last. He was consistent in a way that felt rare, always texting when he said he would, showing up on time and remembering the little details I mentioned in passing. The drive to his cabin was longer than I expected, winding through rural roads and dense forests. My GPS cut out halfway there, forcing me to rely on the directions Daniel had sent. The farther I drove, the more isolated it felt. Houses grew sparse, and the towering trees seemed to close in around me. When I finally pulled up to the cabin, Daniel was waiting on the porch. He waved as I parked, his smile as warm as ever. "You made it," he said, opening my car door. The cabin was picturesque, nestled in a clearing surrounded by trees. Inside, it was even cozier. A roaring fire in the stone hearth, soft rugs on the wooden floor, and shelves lined with books and knickknacks. "This is incredible," I said, taking it all in. "I'm glad you like it," he said. "I wanted tonight to be special." Dinner was already in progress when I arrived. Daniel had made homemade pasta with a rich tomato sauce, paired with fresh bread and a salad. He moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, pouring me a glass of wine as he stirred the sauce. "You weren't kidding about being a good cook," I said, watching him work. He laughed. "It's just a hobby, but I enjoy it." We ate at the long wooden table, candlelight casting soft shadows across the room. The food was incredible, and the conversation flowed as easily as ever. Daniel asked about my childhood, my favorite memories, and the things I wanted to accomplish in life. It felt natural, like he genuinely wanted to know me. After dinner, he suggested we play cards by the fire. I agreed, happy to stretch the evening out. As I shuffled the deck, something caught my eye. A photo tucked under a stack of books on the coffee table. It was a woman, smiling brightly in front of a trailhead. She looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place her. "Who's this?" I asked, holding up the photo. Daniel glanced at it, his expression unreadable for a moment before he smiled. "Oh, that's my sister," he said lightly. "She's a big hiker, like me." I laughed it off, but the moment lingered in the back of my mind, like a splinter I couldn't quite reach. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of texts, phone calls, and more dates. Daniel was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner: attentive, kind, and thoughtful. He had a way of making me feel like the most important person in the world. But little things began to nag at me. One night, as we sat on his couch watching a movie, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening as he quickly silenced the notification. "Work stuff," he said, his tone clipped. Another time I mentioned a friend's upcoming party, and his mood shifted instantly. "You don't need to go to that," he said, his voice soft but firm. "We could just stay in. I'll cook." It wasn't the words themselves that bothered me. It was the way he said them, like it wasn't a suggestion, but a decision already made. I brushed off these moments, convincing myself I was overthinking. After all, no one was perfect, right? The turning point came on my third visit to the cabin. Daniel had stepped outside to chop firewood, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I'd been tidying up when I noticed a door at the back of the cabin, one I hadn't seen before. It was slightly ajar, revealing a set of narrow stairs leading down into darkness. Curiosity got the better of me. Grabbing my phone, I used its flashlight to navigate the steep steps. The air grew colder as I descended, the wooden stairs creaking underfoot. At the bottom, I found a small room. It was starkly different from the cozy atmosphere upstairs: bare concrete walls, dim lighting, and shelves lined with neatly labeled boxes. My heart raced as I opened the nearest box. Inside was a stack of photos, each one of a different woman, smiling on dates, hiking, cooking, laughing. Beneath the photos were items, personal things like bracelets, hairbrushes, and scarves. I backed away, bile rising in my throat as the truth settled over me. These weren't keepsakes, they were trophies. My breathing quickened as I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by Daniel's secret. Each shelf, each box, felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the photos or the objects, it was the meticulousness of it all. Each box was labeled with a name. Sophie, Karen, Melissa, Emily. I recognized one of the names. Emily. I didn't know her personally, but I'd seen her picture on a missing persons flyer at the grocery store months ago. My knees felt weak as I scanned the shelves, the enormity of what I was looking at sinking in. This can't be real, but it was. The smell of the room was the final, sickening detail. A faint, sour scent lingered in the air, something chemical and organic all at once. My hand trembled as I opened another box, this one containing a small bracelet. A delicate charm dangled from it, a tiny silver hiking boot. I froze. It was the same bracelet as the woman in the photo on the coffee table. I backed away, the phone's flashlight shaking as I turned to run. But as I reached the stairs, I heard it. Daniel's voice calling down from above. "Jess? Where are you?" My heart leapt into my throat. I killed the flashlight on my phone, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, I didn't breathe. "Jess?" His voice was closer now, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor above. I forced myself to think. There was no way I could sneak past him. He was blocking the only exit. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything I could use to protect myself. My fingers closed around something cold and solid, a rusty crowbar leaning against the wall. Daniel's silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, backlit by the dim light from the cabin above. "What are you doing down there?" he asked, his tone calm but laced with something sharper. I got lost," I stammered, the words spilling out before I could think. He didn't move. "Lost?" he repeated, his voice softer now, almost amused. He began descending the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. "You shouldn't be down here, Jess. This is my space." My grip tightened on the crowbar, my palms slick with sweat. "I think I should go," I said, my voice shaking. I just remembered I have plans tonight." Daniel reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, a slow, predatory smile that sent a chill down my spine. "You're not going anywhere," he said softly. Before I could think, I swung the crowbar. It wasn't a clean hit. Daniel dodged just enough to avoid the brunt of the blow, but the edge grazed his shoulder and he let out a grunt of pain. "Jess!" he barked, his calm demeanor snapping. I didn't wait for him to recover. I bolted up the stairs, my legs screaming in protest as I took them two at a time. Behind me, I heard the clatter of the crowbar hitting the floor and the thunder of Daniel's footsteps as he gave chase. My only thought was to get outside. The cabin door loomed ahead, tantalizingly close, but the distance felt endless. My lungs burned as I reached for the handle, yanking it open with all my strength. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop. I sprinted toward my car, fumbling for my keys in my pocket. Behind me, Daniel was shouting, his voice raw and furious. "Jess, stop!" I reached the car and dove inside, locking the doors just as Daniel emerged from the cabin. His face was twisted with rage, his breath visible in the frigid air. The engine sputtered to life and I slammed the car into reverse, the tires skidding on the gravel driveway. Daniel ran toward me, his hands slamming against the hood as I backed up. "Don't do this, Jess!" he yelled, his voice muffled through the glass. I didn't look back as I sped away, the headlights cutting through the dark forest. My hands shook on the wheel, my vision blurred by tears. Every shadow seemed to move, every corner a potential hiding spot for him. It wasn't until I reached the main road that I allowed myself to breathe. But even then, the fear didn't subside. The drive back to town was a blur. I don't remember how I got home, but I know I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, his smile, his rage, his eyes as he stood at the bottom of those stairs. I kept waiting for him to appear, to break down my door and finish what he started. I called the police the next morning. I told them everything, about the cabin, the boxes, the photos, the bracelet. They promised to investigate, but their tone was skeptical, like they didn't quite believe me. "We'll send someone out there," they said, but I could tell they thought I was exaggerating. A week later, an officer came to my apartment. He looked grim, his hands clasped tightly in front of him as he delivered the news. The cabin was empty. No photos, no boxes, nothing. It's like he knew we were coming. My stomach dropped. "Did you find him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer shook his head. "We've issued a warrant, but there's no trace of him. We'll keep looking." That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've moved to a new city, changed my phone number, and deleted every social media account I had. But no matter how far I run, I can't escape him. I still dream about the cabin, about the cold basement and the boxes with women's names. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that he's standing over me, watching. The worst part? Sometimes I hear my phone buzz late at night. I tell myself it's nothing, a phantom vibration, a trick of my imagination. But when I check, there's always a message. Just one. "Hey Jess, you have the kindest smile.